Hello and welcome back to Prosecco and Plot Twist with myself, Sheila, and Christina. So, without any further ado, cheers, my dear. Enjoy. Okay, so as you can see and as you know from our last episode, we are reviewing The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. And this speaks to my heart so much. It really does, because it's no excuse that I am a romantic at heart, and I love the classics, and I really thoroughly enjoy this really modern twist on a classic. And I have to admit, you bought me this for Christmas, and I have to admit I was a little bit skeptical. I thought, oh my goodness, how could anybody even begin to mess with any of the classics, never mind Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice. But to say that it is absolutely exceptional is an understatement. Hadlow, I don't know if you agree, Christina, but she has managed to capture she's this lovely fusion of the classic with the contemporary, the modern, even in terms of language, you know.
Yeah, I think it's still read, as a true retelling, but at the same time, it was something that
was reimagined.
appealed. Yeah. And I also feel like that sort of idea of the outcast and the underdog, that's what got me, because of course, usually in books, it's always the most beautiful or the most charismatic person that sort of gets what they want, and they get the happy ever after. But I resonated with this so much. I really enjoyed it.
I think Mary Bennet, the other Bennet sister in question, it's really, she was, I suppose, the least beautiful or the least attractive by standards of the day.
Yes.
And she was very much as well reading this, the middle child. So there was a whole host of things going on there. So there was Lizzy and Jane, who were the two siblings above her, and then below they had a very tight alliance.
Yes.
And you had Kitty and Lydia below her, and they had a very tight alliance. And Mary was somewhere in between.
At the start, she did actually have a great relationship in her childhood, and then it was only as she realized that she wasn't as pretty or as,
but that was after a conversation that she had overheard between her mother and her aunt. Now, I really do think that gives us a lovely segue into the opening of the book, which really, if you like, takes us back to Austen's Pride and Prejudice and gives us a very skillful synopsis of the Bennet family, the Bennet girls, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, who they were. I suppose for any modern reader reading this who wouldn't even be familiar with the historical context of Austen's era, there's enough in this to give it, a very rich flavour of and the hierarchy and the class system and the patriarchal system and all of those things.
So just on that, I also think, obviously this book is going to appeal more to those who enjoyed the original Pride and Prejudice, but I also think that on its own, as a standalone, I think it works just as well. If you saw that in the shop and you goes,
because I was just going to challenge you there to say, no, you don't have to have read Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, I know, but that's what I'm saying. It works as a standalone because again, we've got that their retelling of, or that their story of the underdog, and it just speaks to me on so many levels. So
we have our heroine, and the theme of triumph over adversity, which very much comes through in Mary Bennet and the ups and downs, and I suppose her her growth as a character and finding her feet, and most importantly, finding her own sense of self-worth and dignity, and we can talk about that as how the ending of the novel. Within that, we also have the themes which are all written into this very first chapter of the book, You have the themes of marriage, the themes of love. You have the theme of beauty, and you have the kind of very much the theme of femininity versus feminism,
Yeah.
and that trope coming through. And I know you and I have very different opinions on that, but I do think that in terms of this, even though we're coming at it from maybe slightly different perspectives, we do end up in the same place, which I find is very, I think we
Yeah.
will end up in the same place, which I find very interesting. And then we have, aside from that, the themes of marriage, we have the gender roles of men and women.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to ask you a question.
We're gonna
And
like it.
I haven't told her about this in the first instance. So chew on your strawberry whilst I ask this, and
That's
I
my
will
thinking.
give you a little thinking time. Would you say that this novel is a feminist novel? That's a pretty
That
loaded
is a
question.
loaded question, because then for me it comes down to what do you take away from feminism. And for me, feminism is the right to choose what sort of life you have, and we can see that in different characters. Like, I don't think that Elizabeth and Jane are any less of an image of feminism than Mary Bennet, because they've chosen this life. This is what fulfills them.
I think to say that this is a feminist text is so reductive to the text and offensive to not just women, but to the very rich male characters that she has written into this
Oh,
text.
I do like the male characters
Because what I think she has done very, very cleverly is show that this is not about either a patriarchal society or a feminist uprising. This is very much a rich tapestry of humanity.
human experience and
Yes,
stuff. Yeah,
because
I would say I agree with you in that I wouldn't describe it as a feminist novel. It definitely doesn't read like that, but I do think that is a theme that's sort
absolutely
of
no, it's
interwoven
it's a
throughout
theme,
it.
but it's not. It shouldn't be
No.
read as a
I read
feminist
it
text.
more as an uplifting story of an underdog, and that there's it wouldn't matter if Mary Bennet was male or female for me. We were rooting for her the whole way. It didn't matter what it felt like she was resigned to a certain life, because of, it wasn't that she chose not to have a husband, not to have children, not to have a family home, not to be a homemaker. It was that life seemed to have put these like hurdles in front of her that she couldn't.
I'm going to actually say that yes, you're right, but to an extent. And I'm going to say it wasn't life. It goes right back to a much more
Well,
intimate.
it was society.
No, it wasn't society.
It was her.
No, it wasn't her. It was her mother. And I think it goes right back to that nucleus of the home. And that's where I really think that we should start. But one of the reasons that I would say that is because when we look at the description of the Bennet's marriage, okay, and we take in the historical context and what was expected, what was valued there. If we look, like, we're only on page 7, and excuse my reading, but this is like, this is my passion. Mr. Bennet, for Mr. Bennet, however, the benefits of his marriage were far less apparent. His failure to consider whether his spouse's character was likely to bring him as much pleasure as her appearance had more serious and lasting consequences. The shallowness of Mrs. Bennet's mind and her limited nature of her interests meant that theirs could never be a partner of equals. She could neither be his companion nor his friend. Her beauty had been enough to win him, but as Mr. Bennet soon understood, it was not enough to make him happy. So Mr. Bennet there, very much part of the patriarchy there, but was clearly looking for more, that there's a redeeming quality being written in there to him.
I think, like, with, okay, I don't want to put a general spin on it, but most people are looking for the best looking, it wouldn't do.
No, but
I think
yes,
there is a
no,
vanity there
yes,
as
no,
well.
but obviously, so there is there, if you like, that realization after the fact, because she goes on and she says, fortunately for Mrs. Bennet, she was not a reflective woman, and if her husband now regretted the principles on which he had made his choice of a wife, she remained oblivious to this
Yeah.
fact. So there was obviously some character development for Mr. Bennet, that he
grew up, essentially.
or he realized that there is more. It's not just the superficial one, because what I actually found here is that time and time again, that it is, you have Mrs. Bennet, the majority of the female characters here, whether you have Mrs. Bennet, Lydia, you have Miss Caroline Bingley, who is just, oh goodness, she is a mastermind.
And she just keeps coming back, and you're like,
yeah, but they have the loudest voice. They affect the most power. They are, if you like, they are the ones who are keeping their fellow women down. It doesn't seem to be the men who are doing that in this text, which is why I would say that this is, because I remember looking at this when I read that and I was like, oh my goodness, this is, okay, this is interesting. There's going to be a much deeper, there's going to be much more depth to this than simply just, oh, let's do it. That kind of trope that we don't need boys, we don't need men, but she has written in here lots of very, very rich men, like for me, and I'm sure, I don't know whether this was something that you enjoyed from the text as well. Even that scene, the fact that Wordsworth was revisited, the poems were brought back in upon Westminster Bridge, and even the fact that Mr. Hayward had set that up for her, and it was Mr. Gardner who accompanied her there, her uncle. I find that really...
I feel like that marriage there, the marriage between Mr. and Mrs. Gardner, their relationship was my favourite, because you could tell that was a marriage of equals. You could tell that was two people who really loved each other. Even their family home, the where
dynamic there.
He said, or I think it was him, he said about children, they're heard and seen,
Yeah.
And
that's what I love. There was that lovely infusion between the old and the new, kind of the very best of what that society had to offer, with the very best of what contemporary society has to offer. And the fact that Mr. Gardner was Mrs. Bennet's brother. I
know, they were like two different people.
Because you would have expected that all of the virtue and values that he had would have been in her, according to, if you were to look at the... Because to say that everybody in society at that time was woman-hating or abused power, that would be
you could see there was some freer thinking characters like Mr. Ryder and stuff as well,
He is possibly the character that provoked my sympathy the most.
Oh, really?
Well, and I'll tell you why. Yes, he was a rogue.
I did like him. Yes. And whenever they were saying about his charm and not to fall for his charm, and Mary was like, I won't fall for his charm.
But
I thought that as a reader, and I'm going, I really like him.
Yes. There was, he had, like, when she rejected his marriage request, his response to her kind of hit me right here, and that's where I thought that she essentially, and I'm kind of paraphrasing the idea that maybe I've misread it, you please correct me if I'm wrong, that had she seen fit to marry him, she would have made him a better version of himself.
But then it comes to that age-old question, because throughout the whole thing, they're talking about this was not a marriage of equals. She knew with Mr. Collins that he would have been a project, essentially. And whenever she met, I feel like John Sparrow, he was her first sort of
He saw her
when nobody else
when
did.
nobody did, which I thought that was brilliant.
And I think Mr. Hayward for her was nearly a flashback to that emotion for her, you know, and there was, I don't think it's a woman's job to make a man better.
Absolutely not. And that's why
Yes.
the fact that she had the courage
Yes.
to refuse, particularly from the pressure that Mrs. Bennet then
Yeah,
brought
I
again.
thought Mrs. Bennet was going to go and write her own letter for him.
And the weight of his connection and
Yes.
that kind of, and I suppose it speaks really
Yeah.
to something else now that we're talking about it, that theme of kind of being so upwardly mobile, socially moving upward socially,
Yes.
because she really was the quintessential social climber, Mrs. Bennet, by trying to attach her star to Lady Catherine and to the aristocracy. She'd been very successful with the marriages of her first two children. She didn't talk about Lydia, who was interestingly her darling. The fact that Lydia was all of, in terms of her vanity, her
and he had no
silliness of
problem,
way
you
of
know,
going on,
yeah.
and she was essentially a younger version of his wife, Mrs. Bennet. And she self-destructed. So it was a huge, I think, very clever dismissal, maybe of this modern culture that we have today of filtering and everybody having to aspire to a certain beauty standard and all of that. So I think that she was very clever. She did that very subtly within the context of this classic world. I think she knocked that on its head, because there was no redeeming for Lydia, for Mrs. Bennet, and for Caroline Bingley. The irony of the fact that they were the most aesthetically beautiful people in this text, but they were the ugliest in their hearts and souls.
Yes, and do you know, I read, like, because after I read Everbeck, I go check other people's reviews just to ensure mine are.
You've said that before.
I know, but people were giving out, you know, about the character development just being too fast. And that's one thing I really disagree with for
in
Mary.
this text.
Yeah, because usually whenever I read a review, I can go, I can kind of see that. But the character development for me, for Mary, from start to finish now, the first third of it is just a Pride and Prejudice retelling, you know, a lot of it. But that's to be expected.
Well, I wouldn't say, no, I would disagree with retelling. It's a reimagining. So it's from a different, it's from a different perspective. Yeah. And I don't think that you could, to be fair to Hadlow, you couldn't really launch into the Other Bennet Sister without
that you need
going
it for
over
context. Yes, but just we're getting this sense, you know, because she is kind of the oddball of the family, and a lot of the events that happen in Pride and Prejudice, it's interesting to see from her perspective. You know, what was she thinking during that time, and you do feel a real pity for her, you know, because she is, like, she's trying to get Mr. Collins' attention at the piano with her.
Well, I was going to mention that to you, because
and that bit broke my heart.
It did, but so we'll come to that, and then I want to go back, so in case I forget, I want you to remind me to go back to the comment, to that moment when she realised what it was about her that offended her mother so much, you know, that conversation at the start when she was a young child, because it impacted her relationship with her sisters. She began to think of herself as other in relation to them. The sisters were children themselves, and they didn't have the emotional depth or maturity to understand or to do anything about that. And then the impact from that, the fact that the younger two, particularly Lydia, was encouraged to berate Mary, and you know, she followed the example of her mother. So for me, and I'm sure you're a mother now, and I'm your mother, I would say that in this house anyway, I was the boss. Growing up, you know,
and especially with girls, a girl is going to look
to her mother. Yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, there was all of that, and then
her Mary looking for her father's affections broke my, and I feel like there was a part of him
he just wasn't strong enough. Like
Yeah.
even that scene, if we come back to what
Yeah.
you were talking about there, the piano recital, and we began to see. So obviously in Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth was the heroine. She was
Yes.
very and to Hadlow's credit, she was witty. She was the most beautiful. So within Elizabeth, you have the very best virtues of of any person,
Yeah.
not necessarily that
I
people
was going
might
to
look
say femininity.
no, but that's not like, obviously, if you like when you met your husband, there was an initial
Yeah.
attraction there. So to say that that's just only a male thing is disingenuous.
Yeah.
So that's why I say it goes beyond.
Yeah.
It's more of a person, which is why this is such a rich tapestry of the intricacies of society and the interactions between men and women within different levels of society and hierarchy within family and within society and all of that. Because even though we have moved away from a class society, we still have a hierarchy.
Oh yeah, you can see it in schools, you can see it in jobs.
Yes,
it is everywhere.
It's not just a hierarchy in terms of gender. Yes, there is an element of that, but it's not just that. To say that it's just gender is again reductive.
Class comes to so many other
so huge,
things,
and that's why I think this is such a rich text. But within that, what I think that Hadlow did so well, looking at Lizzy out of Mary Bennet's eyes, we see that moment of real, the pride, which was her biggest flaw.
Yeah.
And the worry, because she was there. Darcy was obviously there, the Bingleys were there, and Mary embarrassed her. And it was because she wielded power over her father. Mary observed that look between Lizzy and Mr. Bennet, and then Mr. Bennet intervened for Mary's benefit as well as for Lizzie's.
I think he came
went
from a
about
place
it
of love. Yeah.
in a clumsy way.
But even his apology, like without saying sorry, he did, and I feel like that. It's, and again, I'm not trying to put like a blanket across all men or anything, but generally, women find it easier to.
But that is
say that to talk about how they're feeling and say the word sorry.
Well, I think the facts, modern society lends itself to that.
Yeah.
There's so much work, and rightly so, being invested into encouraging men of all ages to talk.
Yeah.
Even, if you think about the Men's Shed program, it's okay to talk and to try and encourage young men to talk about their feelings. So important.
Even that olive branch that he extended, I think that it was his way
of
apology, and it was
a kindness. He saw her distress,
that she had never. That's all she wanted from him, and she, even her book that she was making.
In terms of that, the relationship between Hadlow was very limited, and I think that she did the right thing, or she was. It wasn't that she was limited. She had to stay true to the original,
text, I know.
Because Mr. Bennet's untimely death in Pride and Prejudice was, and the entail and all of those things, and that really meant that, which is again disagreeing with the fast-paced character development that you were talking about earlier on, that you didn't agree with in terms of the reviews. The fact that she didn't get to resolve her issues with her father really broke my heart.
Yeah,
and I do think that he would have been receptive to that and to her. But again, there was a reality and a realism to that, because that happens in life right across the board. That
life, it just stops.
You're never guaranteed of there's no guarantee for tomorrow. There's no guarantee that you're going to have the time to repair the relationships or to invest in relationships that are broken.
Yeah.
And that very much came through. And I think that was that moment was full of pathos, on the day of his funeral, when she took out that little book with her quotations.
Heart.
Yeah.
And she's all like, oh, and I'm never going to be able to win his affections, And in my heart, I like to think from that little moment with him taking her away from the piano, that was him showing that, yes, I see you and I know you, and that's it. Just I couldn't leave it that she just did all this work, was so studious, was trying to be everything that he.
But if you go back again, he did see her, like, even when she had to fight to get the eyeglasses and for the oculist to come to the
Yeah,
house.
absolutely, yes.
Even his speech, "You're forgetting, my dear, that I myself wear glasses," added Mr. Bennet. "I should not like to think of myself as an old man, doddering or otherwise, but I admit I should be quite incapable of study without them." And Mrs. Bennet replies, "You are teasing me, Mr. Bennet, but you know the truth of what I say. A man may wear spectacles, I suppose, even a young man, especially if he is a lawyer or a clergyman or such like, and no one will speak ill of him." And then Mr. Bennet looked thoughtful. "Perhaps one of those very men you have just described will offer for her." And that comes full cycle in Mr. Hayward, who is the lawyer.
I just love him. My heart was fluttering the whole time.
And that was just lovely. And he goes on, "If Mary is not to read," so he stands up for her. And when he did hold his corner for her,
but he was also quite weak, sarcastic and
no,
all
he was. But
them.
I think I'm not saying that he. I think that had Mrs. Bennet had the depth of character to be his equal, as Mrs. Gardiner was Mr. Gardner's equal, it would have been a very different experience. And we see a little flavour of that again. And I know we're talking a lot about marriage here and relationships, but that's a huge... So you have the marriage of, obviously, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. You have the fact that, kind of going within this, we have the Pride and Prejudice marriage of the Bingleys and the Darcys in running kind of under the undercurrent to that. You have the prospects of marriage for the other girls, Mary, Lydia and Kitty, always there. But then we have the Mr. Collins coming in, who is the distant relative, and the fact that he offers for Lizzy, obviously, who is his first choice, and she refuses.
No, Lizzy wasn't his first choice. Jane was.
Oh, yes.
But Mr. Bingley already had his sights on her.
He knew that ship had sailed, for want of a better expression.
The thing that angered me, not about the book, but just about the characters Mrs. Bennet in particular. Mary vouched for herself and she says, "I am the only person who would be a suitable wife," because it was clear Lizzy didn't want him.
Yeah.
But Mrs. Bennet shutting her down and then somehow spinning Charlotte's we slide in there as her fault.
Yes.
I was raging.
If you track everything you said, society at the start, and I said, no.
Mrs. Bennet.
We go right back. And if you look at it, family is the cornerstone of society.
Yeah.
And that really is, it's a much deeper rooted thing. Yeah. So this started in early childhood. And even if you track, right through until the offer from Mr. Ryder and the reaction of Mrs. Bennet. Yeah. If you track through the fact that when Mary was getting married, Mrs. Bennet didn't go.
And do you know what? I was happy.
Absolutely.
I didn't want her at that wedding.
But the fact that she chose not to go for her last daughter, who was to be married, it was just, she really was a repugnant character. She was the worst of womanhood. And truth be told, I would argue, controversially, that there's a realism in her character there, because you will find that there is an element, maybe I shouldn't say this in a podcast, I know I'll hear about this, but women are their own worst oppressors.
It's called internalized misogyny.
Is it?
Yeah, it has a name.
Excuse me. But they are. They really do. And
and it's also called pick-me's. Anybody wants the modern day language for
Okay,
it.
but it is, they really do. And that has not changed.
No, but the thing is, you could go back 2,000 years. Yes, our style has changed, our laws have changed, but at the crux of it, human nature will always be.
Human nature.
Yeah.
And that's what she does, that's what she captures
Yeah.
so brilliantly in this text.
Can we talk about? It's just something that I love. The fact that Mary finding a man wasn't the be all and end all for her. It was that sort of found family trope that she found her place with the Gardeners. It wasn't the family she was born into, but this was a family she had chose for herself while she was trying to find her way in the world.
When she arrives at when Mrs. Gardner, she's been staying with her aunt and uncle for a little while, and the time for entertaining the season is coming back round again, and they will be entertaining in London. They need to get her some clothes. Now, what she chose to do, Mary, because of the detrimental impact that her mother's cruelty and rejection and imposed idea of beauty on her child, and I can't as a mother even begin to imagine that.
Yeah,
You know,
it was
how
a wee
to
bit
look
cruel.
how a wee bit, you know, even to look at a child and to say that they are ugly.
And the thing with children is you don't think they pick up a lot, but that stuff
They absorb
sticks.
everything. They're sponges. But Mrs. Gardner's words here, I just thought, oh my goodness. So Mary had said, I'm not sure I'm suited to finery. I think I'm better with something plain and unassuming. And Mrs. Gardner replies, she was so shrewd. Perhaps, said Mrs. Gardner, but good things don't need to be showy or gaudy, you know. Sometimes the very best stuff can seem quite plain until one examines it closely. It is only then that one sees its true quality.
I think that was
Oh,
literally Mr. Hayward when he seen Mary for the first time, because I knew straight away as soon as they started talking, because that was another thing. People were annoyed, you know, at how quickly she was able to banter with him suddenly. And I was like, but if you find the right person that you gel with and
but
click
you
with.
said it right there. So I had no issue with that either. He saw her.
Yes.
He saw her. He wasn't looking for, you know, and her her intelligence, her ability. He looked beyond the fact that she was trying to make herself as inconspicuous, that she had deliberately, she was setting herself on the outside. And and what I loved about Mary was that she went away and she thought, she internalized, and she thought about all of the advice that she was given, and she began to examine her own ideas, which were very, very entrenched and very, very staunchly rooted. To think about, so we've talked quite a wee bit about the female characters. We will touch on Caroline Bingley later, but I want to talk about, and we want to kind of take Mr. Gardner or Mr. Bennet. I think from the beginning, Hadlow showed us that she was creating male characters not as heroes, but as humans with virtue as well as flaws. And she did that very well in her all her characters. But if you look at Collins,
I would say he would be like the male equivalent to Mary, because he, like, just like her, he doesn't understand, and I don't. He explains that his dad was quite
cruel to him. He had no confidence.
Yes.
So he developed
I
a persona.
think he was just the male Mary, and I think that, you know, he didn't understand, you know, the proper social cues or anything, the things, and he admits, you know, how stupid he was that he told Mr. Bennet that he does come up with these things.
And what
to
do you
say.
get there? There's character growth. There was no character growth for Mrs. Bennet.
No, oh no, she was the whole way through.
No character growth for Lydia. there was character growth for Kitty, who
Mm-hmm.
was, if you like, had virtue but was easily led by
Yes,
Lydia.
but we could see that from the start. Yes.
But no character growth for Mrs. Bennet, no character growth for Lydia. And I see that very much in Mr. Collins.
Mm-hmm.
However, what I found, and this was, we kind of come, the marriage between Mr. Collins and Charlotte when Mary goes to visit after the death. So she has been to the Bingleys' house. She's been to Pemberley with the Darcys. She has been bullied out of Pemberley, or bullied out of the Bingleys by Caroline Bingley. She's gone on to...
She knew she wasn't... I don't think it wasn't that she was welcome, but she was an outsider in their happy family.
So what you have there, and I've thought about this as well, was you have Mr. Darcy, who was very reserved.
Yeah.
Now, his character development occurred in Pride and Prejudice. And Hadlow was not telling their Darcy's story.
Yeah, I think I would have been fed up if she was living in their house.
No. So, and also again, you have the fact that he too was a male character who struggled to adapt, but you could see that there's, growth and possibilities there for him. So she moved from there because she felt like an interloper in the intimacy of their family, because she hadn't fully found her own self-worth either. And I think it's that moment when she finds her self-worth that she comes into her own. And a huge person in enabling her to do that was Mr. Collins.
He really was. That he put in
but she was such a good... Mary's visit to back to her childhood home, which Charlotte and Mr. Collins now live in as a result of the entail, was a really, really interesting part of that text for me.
I didn't like Charlotte's character development. I think she kind of went downhill. She became quite nasty. Before she was just open and honest, but I feel like I was getting fed up. The way you could tell Mr. Collins wanted something more from this relationship. He wanted a companionship, but she had got the marriage, she had got the house, she has got the child. For her job was done, in securing that marriage. So I don't know. I was like, God, because the first thing I thought whenever, when they started doing their wee library, I was like, please do not have her
have an affair.
That was in the back of my mind the whole time. Because it would have completely destroyed Mary for me. And thankfully, she didn't.
Hill,
and I don't think it was in Mary's character to do that at all, because Mary couldn't even see.
No, it wasn't even in her head.
Yeah,
no.
She was just...
She
wanted to learn.
Yeah.
And she wanted to find her place in this world. She wanted a friend. Mr. Collins extended that olive branch, but I shared her sentiments when she said, what... Because it was only then that he realised, I should have picked her. And she
think that was...
why did you not see me?
The tragedy of it. But that, again, is the growth. And that's where Mr. Collins... It was a tough learning curve for him.
Yeah.
But I do think that was that was a very poignant kind of little interlude in the text, because you got a momentary glimpse, a very brief glimpse into what Mary's life could have been like in her own home, how happy she could have been.
But I don't think she, at that point in the novel, that's what was in my head. She would have been, no, I don't think she would have been happy. I think she would have been content. I think she realised that, and I think her first spark again was with John Sparrow, that there was so much feeling and so much love. And
but she did. She actively closed herself off to that. She did. But I think, again, and it's just as we're talking through this, Mary was a great observer of society and relationship dynamics. So she had first-hand observation of her mother and father. She had observed firsthand the love between her sisters and their husbands.
Mm-hmm.
She was coming then out of that. She knew that that existed into to the marriage of Charlotte and Mr. Collins, and she very quickly realized, here we
But
have a power
yeah,
imbalance.
isn't it funny though how she could see that, but she couldn't understand? She had a real innocence about her own actions. You know, she couldn't see how other people would perceive what she was doing, which was believable for her character because
Absolutely.
she's never felt. I know what she did with John Sparrow, but she's never felt wanted or never felt included or special by the opposite sex. So,
But it took Mary to have, and when I say interest, but to have that shared interest
Yes.
in learning with Mr. Collins,
Yeah.
for Charlotte to kind of
See, that
reevaluate
again,
herself.
that's where I was, because then Charlotte basically kicked her out of the house.
Well, I can understand that, because given I suppose the historical context of it, because she was basically, Charlotte was the boss of that house. She had created a very aesthetically beautiful home on the outside, but it was miserable.
Yeah.
So the home, I think, functioned as a symbol
Yeah.
for appearances.
Yes.
And below that, when you scratched a wee bit deeper, you were like, okay, there,
because
so I think it was
even
that
think
contrast.
in Mary recognizing, it's different, but it's still my home. It's nearly that sort of symbolism that
Yes.
she can change what she wants, but this is still the place
Absolutely. And the
grew
fact
up.
that it was in her father's library
I
that this all
know.
happened, it adds that rich layer
But
to it.
I was glad, and at that point I was like, whenever I'd established, with the gardeners and Mary having finding her place there with them.
But Mary's virtue coming in, I just want to finish the Collins, coming in to that, to being part of that marriage or witness to that marriage. She left them in a much better state than she found them.
She did, yes.
And I find that really important. She did.
Yeah. And it was nearly like, because at that point I was like, if Mary doesn't find a man, I don't think it would be the worst thing for her. I think she did find gratification in others being happy, as her mother so often said about herself. She always said stuff, don't worry about, to the men, that says, don't worry about me as long as everyone else is happy. But to everyone else, she was a pure cow. But I think Mary did truly embody that, so much so that she nearly, like with the gardeners, tried to hide herself away because she thought that's what would make them happy, because that's what made everybody else happy in her life. And at that point I was like, if the story ended here with Mary being happily settled, with Mary, simply teaching the kids piano, I would have been happy.
Because she had found a level of contentment. She had found it.
But then when Mr. Hayward was introduced, I just knew, because it was, as soon as it said London, I automatically thought Mr. Sparrow, or John Sparrow, his daddy was Mr. Sparrow. I was like, we're going to see him again, and then their love story is going to bloom. But I was glad it didn't. I was glad that he only served at the beginning of what life could be like for her, and that not everybody was as confined by these societal expectations, that there were people who would and wanted to see her and appreciated her knowledge, appreciated her
Intelligence.
kind of wit. Yeah, absolutely. And when Mr. Hayworth was introduced, I swooned. I was like, it takes a lot. It does take a lot for me, but it was the fact.
Can I just pause you there and say you swooned? Now, this also proves what I have been saying and saying and saying. You know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I know, because I don't disagree. I just don't think that it should be censored.
No, it shouldn't. I didn't say it should be censored, but less is more. This
Yes.
there was no gratuitous
I feel like,
sex scenes or
well,
anything. The
was there that in
romance.
Pride and Prejudice?
Pardon?
Was there any in Pride and Prejudice?
Well, if
It
you'd
would have
seen the
became
ankles or something, you know, it
no,
would have been
no,
all
but
very.
I feel like if she
Yes,
did that, it
it
would
would
have
have been.
been trying to sensationalize, or
Yes, but
the
I'm so. That's what I mean. I'm so glad that she stayed true to the, you know, that beautiful
but there
fusion
is
of the classic. She didn't feel the need to kind
mm-hmm.
of bombard us with naked bodies and descriptions of actions and all the rest because it's not needed. You swooned, and I love that
I did.
archaic time.
No,
Yeah, because
I
there was
quite
something
like a
within that.
man with witty
Yes.
banter. I like that they're sort of, do you know, like the yearning, love when a man yearns. I did
Talk
not.
me through that now, Christina. I don't think I've ever encountered that.
You
So
know
what
that
does
they're
that mean?
real.
Yeah, I feel
From,
like
do
I've
you know,
missed
like
out.
that their bit at the lakes where he is noticing Mr. what do you call it? Ryder, his attentions towards Mary, you know, and you could just tell there was something he wanted to be, that charismatic person that was getting Mary's attention. And I genuinely think Mary goes, he's cool, he's chatty, it's easy to talk to him, but there was nothing romantic there. But he yearned for her, and she
Okay.
just, oh, I loved it. But I didn't like the miscommunication trope.
But look, there had to be something.
No, and
There
do you
did
know,
have
I
to be
think it
something.
worked because they were both held back by society's constraints, because it would have been improper for her to be bold and make that first move. And on the other hand, he couldn't justify, with his position in society, offering her marriage whenever
He had
Mr.
this
Ryder's.
other information.
Yes.
Yes. So, but I think that's why that worked.
Yes.
I quite liked that, and I thought it was really.
And see that waiting game. Do you know that
Oh,
there
yes,
period where you
yes,
were, where
what-
she had turned down Mr. Ryder and Mr. Hayworth still hadn't came back at that
Well,
point?
that brings us back in. Oh, so before we finish
Yeah.
talking about the male characters, what I thought about Mr. Hayward was that he was both a scholar, so he was a professional, he was a lawyer, so he had
in my head he
but
looks
he
like
w- he-
JFK's grandson. Just putting that out there. You don't know what he looks like. He's like 30. He's gorgeous. That's what he
okay,
looks
I'm
like
going to
me.
look up JFK's grandson.
His name's Jack Schlossberg.
Oh, Christina, I did not expect the other Bennet sister to take us in this way, but we'll
He's
move on very
gorgeous.
quickly. So I don't know what he looks like, but I have a mental image of him. But what I liked as well was that he had that depth of emotion, and that really came through in his love of poetry and Wordsworth and the classic. And he was unapologetic for that. So I think that he became for me a very masculine person without having any of the kind of, the tropes of masculinity, like power and oppression and all of those kind of things that are associated with but he was the most masculine character in this text.
I like a wee man that can show his feelings. A wee man that is in touch with his feminine side.
But is it
The
his
beauty of
feminine?
the word.
But I really resent that. Because that's to say that any kind of finer,
That's the way men view it. I'm just
No. That's not the way men view it. That's the way you're not a man and you're viewing it like
I know.
that. He was the most masculine character.
Mr. Ryder.
Hold on, let me finish this.
Okay.
And I would say that it is not fair to say that he was in touch with his feminine side. I think that's reductive.
I think
because that's why men find it hard to talk about their feelings, because they are being portrayed and perceived as being less than manly. Everybody has feelings. Everybody should embrace them and be allowed to talk about them. Now we'll move on to Mr. Ryder. That's my
Mr.
piece.
Ryder was I liked him too. He was much freer thinking than Mr. Well, I don't think Mr. Hayworth wasn't free thinking, but I think Mr. Ryder was more willing to
look at the difference in their social setting. Mr. Hayworth couldn't be more freer thinking, no matter what way he wanted to think about. You've already said that he was restrained by the societal.
He was, yes. It was the fact that, even looking at them, they were both two people who shared a love for poetry, But Mr. Hayworth could also apply rational thinking to it. Mr. Ryder was far more impulsive, like with the storm, and staying out in the storm, to appreciate the beauty of nature.
Please, miss, can I talk now? I want to ask why. Why did she write that in? Why was there that contrast in the characters? Why was Mr. Ryder allowed that kind of latitude?
Because of his place.
Because of his, he came from a different...
He didn't have to do the, he
societal sphere.
Like, he was able to live comfortably without having that job. And it was, he did lower in my esteem whenever his first proposal to Mary was to run away to Italy with him, and she realised,
Hold on a wee minute. Oh no, keep going. I'll come back to you.
No, if you're going to say, about the importance of marriage and
I'm not. But
no, I'm saying, for Mary, she knew that running away with a man, that wasn't for her. She was setting her goals and what she wanted. And whenever she realised he didn't even mention marriage, that sort of cemented for her, and it was nearly an afterthought. And I don't think Mr. Ryder intentionally did it. I do believe that when he asked, he maybe did want marriage, but his freer thinking ideas, whenever he was thinking of the freedoms that they could experience, that marriage was at the bottom of that list. So when he came to actually ask her hand in marriage, I was like, I do believe he holds great affection, and he does have geez, you're making some eyes.
I am.
Do you not agree with me?
Keep going.
He holds Mary in a high esteem, but that was never going to make her happy.
So I agree to an extent.
With what?
With what you've just said. Mm-hmm. But what I am going to say is, why did he eventually propose marriage to her? Because if Mary had not held herself in high esteem, if Mary had not thought, no, I'm not going to, no, there you go, that's my colloquial, this shows you how invested in this. If she had not held herself to that higher level, you are not going to give me something less than, you are not doing me a favor by offering me to run away with you. So that's the one thing that I would say here that she does really well there. She shows women that the power that women have is innately within them. Because if you don't value yourself, nobody else is going to. And in a society, if we're going to say, you've just said you live in a patriarchal society, if you don't value yourself, in that society where if you feel that you are on the, you're the underdog in it, you're definitely not going to be valued by those who are in the position of power if you don't value yourself. So that's what Mary did there. And that's what I think is missing in society today.
To quote RuPaul, if you don't love yourself, ain't nobody else going to love you.
It's not about love. It's not about self-love, because...
It is about
it's about self-worth, which is so much more than self-love. To know your worth and to value your dignity is so much... No, it is reductive. That word love.
No, love is not reductive.
It is. I love shoes. I love strawberries.
That love is different.
But love is... The word love is attributed to everything that it can mean anything.
You have to go study a wee bit of Greek philosophy Mary did.
It is about self-worth and self-dignity, and that very much comes across there. And interestingly, the point that you have made there brings us full circle back to our other female character.
Can I just say about the self-love?
Okay, go on.
I do believe for Mary Bennet, for a woman who has not been shown love often from others, has not been shown affection from others, I do think there is an important element there.
You are conflating affection and love with dignity and worth.
She has never... Tom Hayward, Hayworth, whatever his name is,
you're right,
respects her and loves her, which is something that she hasn't felt. There's nothing wrong with her loving herself
Yes.
as well and learning to love herself.
I don't think we're necessarily saying, I don't think we're opposing each other, but you're not listening to the nuance of what it is that I am saying.
Don't understand nuance.
I think
that was sarcastic.
I don't think you're listening to
I thought this was going to be a lovely wee chat.
It is a lovely chat, and I love.
Angry.
No, we're not angry. I love this. This is my.
See, after this, she gets very scary.
No, I don't.
You can't say those things.
No, the only time I did that was whenever you totally slated the book, and I was saying, Christina, there has to be something.
And look at me now, I've changed.
I just said, yes, be honest, but don't.
Don't have I slagged?
No, but you look. I think we can both say that you can't slag.
Oh
anything
no, I did
here.
like it.
But what I was going to say is, and we'll move on from this. I think essentially we're saying the same thing. But you're a different generation to me, and you're the generation that's talk about self-love, and I would take issue with that because I think that just skims over it. I think that if you want to talk about the gravitas that you and I are both talking about, it comes more than love. It's about self-worth and self-dignity.
What was the different types of loves that Aristotle discussed?
You talk about familial love. You have eros,
eros,
which is sexual love. You have...
it's the only one I can remember. What does that say?
I don't know.
No more comments on this.
Yeah.
Move on.
My God. I think no more Prosecco. I thought this was going to be a wee lovely one. There was no eros and no anything like that in the text, and yet we still dive into it.
Okay, just to move on, can we talk about one more female character that we haven't talked about really? Mrs. Hill.
Oh yes.
I loved her, and
she was very much the mother.
She was she was the person that Mary needed growing up, and I get her. She was split between all the different girls, but
she went to the one who needed her most. What was the problem? What did that relationship between Mary and Mrs. Hill, and that very much so she was a servant, essentially within the Bennet house. And I do think that, that relationship came full
it did at the very end,
which was so lovely.
But the only thing that gutted me was it was a letter that she had sent rather than she was invited to Longbourn, and I could see why that chapter of her life was closed. She wasn't going back, but Mrs. Hill had said, the next time you come to visit, you'll visit me as a married woman.
But there's nothing to say that in this text that
couldn't
when
happen.
Mary and Tom were established, that Mrs. Hill, I always got the feeling, that Mrs. Hill might come to her, because that would just be it would be a nice conclusion. So in my head, that's where I imagined that. But Mrs. Hill was very much, yes, the maternal figure. She was that constant. She was always that voice for Mary, trying to affirm her, but that was limited. And again, why was that limited? Because of her role within the house, and that comes back to that hierarchy, that kind of class.
She could always see in Mary something that Mary couldn't, even to the point, when she put on that, that sort of dress that was at the gold.
I want that dress.
I was picturing this beautiful dress. I was thinking Bridgerton sort of.
But that's I'm thinking, okay, because yes, it doesn't have to be ostentatious, but there was, I want that dress. So I
agree with Miss Gardner in that plain things can be beautiful. Plain
doesn't
too.
mean ugly.
Yes.
It means there's an understated sophistication and elegance there.
But in that time, you did have this beauty, and everyone was aspiring to be her.
But again, standards of beauty.
Yes.
And nothing has changed.
But you could see towards the end as well with Mary, this was just how well I thought her character developed. She cared so much at the start about how she looked. She intentionally tried to hide herself, and she purposefully dressed herself in these plain beige colours, so much so that even when she was going through her heartbreak over Mr. Hayworth not being on the scene, that she was still dressing herself, but not to look good. It was nearly like a second nature. If I'm not doing this, I'm just going to fall back into my pit of despair. You know, it wasn't to look good. It wasn't to attract other suitors. It was just for her at that point. It took more out of her to hide herself than it did
Of
just
course it
to.
did. She was feeding that.
But again, it comes down to
subconsciously.
Mrs. Bennet and what she instilled in her.
So again, we can agree that when you come right back to it, it is in the nucleus of family that all
Mrs.
of these
Bennet's basically the devil in this.
she is not, there are no redeeming qualities.
No.
Which brings us back, so to come back to the other female character that we haven't talked about,
yes.
Miss Caroline Bingley.
Did you think I wanted to forget about her?
No, I don't think we can, because
I thought
she's a mean girl.
She is, and I thought that she was going to redeem herself at the end.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask, because I have
bookmarked
it. Yes, I have. Do you think that she redeemed herself in the letter?
I think it was not her intention to, but she...
But is there a grey area there? Is there the...
I think, again, Caroline Bingley was a product of her environment in that...
No, I think that makes an excuse.
No, well, I'm not excusing her behaviour because a lot of what she did was unnecessary. I'm just saying... Like Charlotte, she had to find a husband. Now,
did she though? Did she?
No.
At the end. So that's what I'm going to say
that
to you.
There was a grey area.
Did she find a husband? So she was just... No, I think I'm going to have to very strongly disagree with you there.
Well, you need to let me finish my thought.
Right, well, okay. This makes a new one, me interrupting you. Right, go finish it. Look, I'm in trouble after this.
I think that for her, marriage was the big... Like, look at how she reacted to Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth. And there was a bitterness there.
Yep.
She was trying to get his attention. But, and I think this kind of mirrors Mary a wee bit, by Elizabeth actively not, nearly rejecting him all the time, that got his attention more. Not that Mary did that, but she didn't really seek anybody out, Caroline, she tried far too hard, even her clinging to Mr. Ritter. And I did get very much from her wee speech to Mary that it was marriage to him that she was looking, because, and I don't think it was love that she felt. I think it was to be married, to have a house, to be secure. That was it.
Well, I would agree with that, but I would take it a step further. It wasn't just to be married. Mr. Rider only really, I would say, you knew that there was some kind of motive in her.
Oh, he knew
friendship with her.
Yeah.
But when his situation became even more, whenever Lady Catherine left everything to him and he became the gentleman when he had moved up in society,
I think she would have did anything.
She attached herself to him to the extent where and remember, she critiqued Lydia very meanly. She bullied Mary horrifically. She took great pleasure out of all of that.
Yeah.
So that's where I would say that she's not just a product of her society, because at no stage throughout
she is a textbook mean girl.
Even in Pride and Prejudice, she had both pride and prejudice within her psyche.
And for what reason?
Exactly. But that's what I'm going to say. Some people, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. Some people just are not.
I just like
nice.
Seeing the good in people. I'm sorry,
but that's
I didn't
what I
think
ask. At the end, did she redeem herself?
Initially, with the letter, I was like, her contacting Mr. Hayworth was possibly. Is it Hayworth or Hayward? Hayward. It was possibly a good thing until Mary sort of. Because she is a thinker, and she
is a thinker. But remember, there is an aspect of Mary being, to a small extent, an unreliable narrator in that, because her perceptions of things are so closely colored by her experience. So if I am trying to be fair, I would say that when I married the two things together, the fact that, because Caroline Bingley
she could have just run off with Mr. Ryder without...
could have procured a husband of some sort at some time. So if we're going to try and take this to its logical conclusion, everything that you have said there, she could have done that. She could have bully-ragged some man at some point
she
into
just
marriage.
wanted what she couldn't have.
So she was a social climber. So she wanted to, wasn't just marriage, but it was to step up onto that next rung. However, I think that after, you remember she came to Mary and she interrogated her about, you know, what had happened with Mr. Ryder and all the rest. And Mary finally stood up to her.
Yeah.
I think that was a point of catharsis.
Like a turning moment.
I do. I think now it's not that she has completely repented and, you know, has become, but I do think that at that point she realized, I'm a bitch. It was that moment.
Are we allowed to say those words? Ooh.
This is Prose and Prosecco uncensored. Yeah.
After dark.
Oh, no, we're not doing any After Dark series. Definitely not. But I do think that fundamentally that was a moment of real self-reflection for her. So if I am going to try and be, you know, optimistic, objective and kind, when she says, you know, she reads the letter, even the tone of the letter, I presume on our, dear Mr. Hayward, I presume on our small acquaintance to take the liberty of writing to you. It may be a breach of good manners, but I am sure that when you have absorbed the contents of this note, you will conclude the intrusion is justified. So the fact that she goes against societal norms.
She's a matchmaker, that's what she is.
And she's, you know, the intrusion is justified because she knows she is now in possession of all of the information. Yeah. Had she been a bitch, she would have kept the information that she divulges to Hayward to herself.
Yeah.
Because that would have...
I do agree with you. I do think there was a wee bit, she was like, I'm definitely getting him back to her so that I can snatch up my man.
No, I'm not saying that she was selfless, but I do think that she did try to
make amends.
Yes, she did. Yes. And even, you know, even the fact that in the tone of what she has said, you're thinking, well, you know, she's not it's not an unbelievable transformation because there's still a wee touch of the acerbic character trait. Yes. Even in the fact that when she says, I believe it will interest you to know that yesterday I took tea with Miss Bennet at the end of a conversation best described as very direct, which has been underlined. Yeah. I thought that was brilliant. She informed me that she had no wish to marry your friend and mine. So the fact that she declares, look, she didn't want him. Mr. Ryder, as she entertained no warm feelings for him, on the contrary, she told me she felt a deep affection only for you, underlined. Yeah. So I do think that there was a catharsis there in that she was not reformed. Yes. She wasn't a fully, she wasn't, she...
I think if they turned around to her and said, you're the reason we're so happy, I think she would take great offence. But I think deep down in her core, probably like most people, I believe people are good. Deep down, even if you have to dig a
But that's
bit.
what I mean. For her at, only moments before the end of the novel. Yeah. Because to have undergone even the fact that we're talking about, did she redeem herself? Mrs. Bennet didn't. She didn't. But Caroline Bingley here. But she redeemed herself without kind of straying from the truth of her character. Even the final paragraph here, as she went on to declare that this was a truth of which she was not ashamed and with which I might do as I please. I have had no hesitation in communicating it to you to act upon as you see fit. Yeah. So give him the information and let him act on it.
Yes.
I'm not breaking any confidence. And I do think that Mary is right to question her motive, is right to question, well, is she sincere? And Hayward brings it back and he says, well, it doesn't matter
Yes.
because,
she's the reason.
and I like to think that given her actions in shock horror, running off to live in
But Mary says something at the end.
Italy.
It's kind of like it's ambiguous in that Mary says, well, she's strong enough, that she would probably push to get her own way of marriage.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's one of those things where it's sort of left open for the
But
reader
if
to
she
decide.
was strong enough to push, I would argue, given the character development of Miss Bingley that Hadlow has, she would have shown that to us.
What do you mean?
So I think that she would have shown that Ryder was bully-ragged into marriage, that she did that. But I like to think that this moment of self-revelation, this moment of, well, it's nearly as if I'm throwing off everything. If you want, like, if we are going to take what you have said, let's run this through, that she is a product of her environment, plus a mean girl, that she has thrown off the shackles of that, and she is trying to right the wrongs that her meanness has done to a degree. Okay,
I think once a mean girl, always a mean girl.
Yes, but she does, it was unwarranted.
Yes.
It was, and the fact that Mary didn't care anymore, there was no power there anymore. So, we'll not get carried away by saying that she's had this great transformation, but there was a small, yes. And then she shakes off the shackles of society and she runs off with him in the same way that Lydia did.
You're saying to me she's probably the strongest?
No.
Only
she's
joking.
not. No, I wouldn't say she's the strongest, but she has, like, there's been a new perspective there.
Yeah.
There's a new perspective there.
Well, to be honest, I was quite happy when I heard she ran away to Italy. I was like, even though the book was over, I was like, thank goodness.
She will, I'm so clever, I think, in my way of thinking here. So you're
so humble too.
I know, but you're going to love this.
Okay.
So she is self-love, where Mary is self-worth and self-dignity.
I self-love myself.
You have worth and dignity and love.
That's because I love myself.
No, it's not. She is self-love. It's narcissistic. It's completely egotistic. So that is I suppose there we have the two sides of that argument.
Well, let's pray RuPaul doesn't watch this, because...
Do you not like what I did there? I didn't even think of that.
Well, now you're making me think I have to like Caroline Bingley.
No, but you have to be aware that there is a possibility in people, no matter how nasty they've been for their whole life, that there is that it doesn't always happen, which she has shown us with Mrs. Bennet. It doesn't always happen. Even when Mary secured this marriage, she doubled down on, and you would have liked to think that she would have been pleased for her daughter. But with Caroline, there was that small little, let's, right the odds, because I think it happened, there was no power there anymore. Do you know
what I think? Also, I feel like Caroline Bingley is Mrs. Bennet was who she was going to become. I feel like their stories could be parallel.
Yes.
But the fact that Caroline Bennet has shown that she is capable of change, however small, I think it also gives the reader a wee bit of hope that this isn't going to be her life forever, that at some point she's going to make the distinction, or make this switch that I can't treat people like this because my life is not great whenever I do it.
Well, this has been a very, very, very robust discussion tonight. And I think that we can both say, hand on heart, a really sound read. I
wasn't expecting it. I'm not going to lie. I don't like retellings. I don't like when people...
But it's not a retelling.
Yeah, reimagining.
It's a reimagining and it takes it beyond it's almost like Pride and Prejudice in the first section is happening on the periphery of Mary's story.
Yes.
So it's not a retelling.
Yeah.
There
is obviously elements
an aspect of that.
But again, as I said at the start, this is great for people who love Pride and Prejudice, but it also works on its own, and I feel like any reader, like, it's not even, I wouldn't even describe it as a romance. I just think
It's not. It's so.
like a coming of age story.
It
nearly.
really is. It really is a coming of age story, and it is absolutely brilliant, and thoroughly enjoy reading this.
Did raise my spirits a wee bit.
It absolutely. So if you do nothing else, read this text. It's on, and we would love to hear your thoughts and opinions in addition to what we have said.
The nuances between self-love and self-worth, please debate.
Please explain for Christina. Does anybody else out there get what I mean? Because I think it's quite clear. Anyhow, but listen, I've nearly forgot to introduce or to explain the book that we're going to look at. So we're going to for next week.
You're
so
just getting ahead of yourself.
I'm getting ahead of myself. Obviously, we're so excited. So next week on Prosecco and Plot Twist, we will be reviewing Daisy Jones and the Six, and some of you may have already read it. You may have watched the adaptation, which is absolutely phenomenal on Prime, I think.
I think it's on Prime, yeah. I watched it that long ago.
Yeah, I think Riley Keough, isn't she?
Yes,
unreal.
and so Sam Claflin. Oh,
and do you know
Robert Pattinson's wife's in it too? I can't remember her name.
Picture is so well cast because in your mind, it's so tight. So yes, that's what we're going to be reviewing next week, and
the
there's
optics
a soundtrack
so far. To accompany it. It's amazing.
Are you going to sing for us next week, Christina?
No, I'll just get Spotify if you want.
I don't think so. There'll be royalties involved there. Okay, so is your glass? Have you got something left in your glass?
I was covering it with my hand to remove the temptation.
Yes. Well, listen, until the next time on Prosecco and Plot Twist. Cheers, my dear.